City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded November 1st, 2021.
And I have 6 p.m. on my clock. I'll call the meeting of the City Plan Commission for November 1st, 2021. First is a roll call. Mayor Weiss is excused. Alder Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Cooper.
Here.
Haynes.
Here.
Hoppy.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
We have 6. That is a quorum. Item number 2 is selection of a temporary chairperson for the November 1st, 2021 meeting of the City Plan Commission. I will go ahead and open the floor for nominations.
I so move that Dave Cooper be temporary chairperson for the meeting of the City Plan Commission.
I'll second.
There's a second. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? And for the third time, any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor of appointing Mr. Cooper temporary chair signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, report of the October 4th, 2021 meeting of the City Plan Commission. Minutes were provided.
Nothing additional to add.
Okay, so we need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Arnson. Is there a second?
Haynes will second.
Seconded by Haynes to approve. Is there discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 4, public hearing and action on a request from Orrin Jacobson representing Upstream Cider LLC for a conditional use permit to operate a small-scale alcohol production facility at 2041 Madison Street, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 2, Sub B, Sub 3, Sub M.
Thank you, Chair. As folks may recall, the applicant did submit a conditional use request to this commission. I believe it was about 3-4 years ago now, which consisted of a similar operation, apple cider. However, with the applicant relocating that use to the proposed location on 2041 Madison Street, that would warrant the new conditional use request for that given property. So as I mentioned, they're seeking to make alcoholic apple cider for both wholesale operation and then sales as well within their tap room. The production facility consists of both a cooler, 9 fermenting tanks, cider presses, and associated storage space. And these small scale alcoholic production facilities are conditional use in the heavy industrial district, thus requiring this conditional use permit. So you can see on the screen here, the left image first shows just the rough proportion in terms of use for the building. You can see the northern half of the building will comprise primarily of the production area and then the associated loading dock to the on the east side or the west side of the building. The southern end, shaded in red, would be the tasting room, the tap room. And then the image on the right shows the interior layout of what the tap room would look like. Just a couple items to keep in mind that staff took a look at upon reviewing the request, namely parking. This is a little bit unique of a use in that there's going to be both vehicular traffic but also semi-traffic as well, given the warehouse and production component of it. However, staff does feel that given that this property abuts both Madison Street and Monroe Street, that traffic should be, any negative impacts in terms of traffic should be mitigated. Next, that there is significant licenses that's required on the local and state level, and the applicant is working with the city clerk's office on that. And then lastly, building code requirements to make the building compliant for the use. So with that, staff would recommend approval, and if the applicant is on the call, actually they're walking in as we speak, they'll be able to provide additional testimony.
No pressure.
Do we have any clarifying questions for Mr. Kuhn before we open the public hearing for the commission? Okay, seeing none, I will declare the public hearing open. Please step forward and say your name for the record and give testimony on the agenda item. Public hearing is open.
Hello, Orrin Jacobson, 1579 Church Street. I'm one of the managing partners of Upstream Cider. I want to thank the committee for considering our conditional use permit today. Our plans for this property are relatively ambitious and we still have a lot of work to do. We've put in this application so that on the zoning side, we'll be prepared when we are ready to open the building, which we do anticipate to come late winter or into the spring of this next year. We have moved in our storing the equipment for our winery operation in the building currently, and are hoping to restart production once all the permitting is in place, including finishing some of the aspects of the state-approved building plans that we currently have. And then we look forward to, as the second phase of development of the property completes, being able to open up the taproom and cafe that we've been working on. So we really look forward to being able to invite the public into this building, and for the combination of all of the food businesses that own the building together, food and beverage businesses, to be able to combine their offerings and have a unique both neighborhood space and destination here in the center of the city. I think we've had our winery operations in the city for a number of years. I don't think we've really run into issues with the neighborhood that we used to be in, and our operations are kind of even more contained in what is now going to be our permanent location. So again, we appreciate the committee's work here, and are looking forward to completing this redevelopment and opening up the taproom and renewing our cider operation. Thank you.
Thank you. Others on the public hearing? For the second time, the public hearing is open. And for the third time, the public hearing is open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, we need a motion to bring discussion to the floor.
I make a motion to approve the request per staff recommendations.
Okay, do we have a second?
Rice.
Commissioner Rice seconds. Okay. Discussion. Yes.
I just have a question. They have a current operation, right? Have there been any comments, concerns, any issues with their previous operations?
As far as the existing or the current uses in the building, or?
As far as their current business, where they're currently operating, right?
I have not heard any negative complaints at all from citizens, so.
Good, thanks.
Other questions, comments?
I have a quick question, and this may be part of the larger plan. I don't see anything about landscaping in this. Is that part of that whole kind of collective redevelopment in there, or does there need to be some landscaping addressed in this?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So the first condition for staff's recommended approval is that the applicant submits a final parking lot plan that would show, approximately how many parking stalls would be added and the driveway locations. Based on that, on how the parking area would be configured, then staff would make the appropriate landscaping requirements based off of what our zoning code says. So, likely there'll definitely be a certain extent of landscaping that would be dependent on how big the parking area is and how it's exactly configured on the lot.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Comments? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve as presented with staff recommended conditions. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 5, public hearing and action on a request from Ryan Wanta, representing Great Northern Distilling, to rezone the properties at 1009 2nd Street, parcel identified, an unaddressed parcel bounded by 2nd Street, 3rd Street and Portage Street, parcel identified, and an unaddressed parcel bounded by 2nd Street and 3rd Street, parcel identified, from B2 Central Business Transition to PD Plan Development.
Thank you, Chair. So as folks may recall, the Belkey Lumber building has been demolished as of, I think, about a month or so now. And that culminated some of the initial planning steps that's been taking place over the last few years as far as the reconfiguration of parcel boundaries for this area in preparation for any future development for this area. So within the last few weeks, the applicant did submit plans to relocate Great Northern Distilling, which is a small-scale alcohol manufacturer, to Stevens Point. And the proposed structure would be approximately 2 stories in height, a little over 8,200 square feet in size. And so the first request, so the next 3 agenda items will relate to the same project, but the first request here is a request to rezone the property to planned development. You can see the image on the screen shows the submitted site plan, showing where the building would be located, parking spaces, the alley to the south, etc. In terms of any planned development requests, there's really 2 central things that staff needs to take a look at in preparation and for analysis for the request. First off, how does the proposed development align with the city's comprehensive plan and other planning-related documents? And then the second being, are there any requested deviations from the zoning code to accompany the proposed development? So the first of which, how does it align with the comprehensive plan? Staff ultimately believes that this request meets the intent of the comp plan of really focusing in an underutilized area of the city. The Belkey Lumber Company has been vacant for several decades now, I believe, and staff does feel it would meet that request. Staff has also reviewed this request relative to the downtown targeted area master plan and feels that several components of the master plan are met with this request. Next, going to the deviations, if you could go back to the site plan, you can see one of the deviations, it relates to pavement setbacks, namely allowing for a 0-foot pavement setback along the north property line between the proposed structure and Kim's Barrel Inn. Second, a 0-foot pavement setback along the southern lot line where the parking spaces are to allow for those 6 parking stalls to be constructed, and then the alleyway as well. Second deviation would be related to signage. Now, our sign code says that for any request to rezone properties to planned development, and that overall sign package exceed the maximum requirement that's allowed, our sign code dictates that sign package has to be reviewed and approved as part of the total development proposal through the planned development rezoning. Specifically, wall signs in this case cannot exceed 500 square feet. The applicant is looking to exceed that with the 3 signs that are shown on the screen here. So ultimately, the request for this agenda item is to rezone the properties to planned development subject to the deviations that's listed on the next slide. So be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, the applicant and the development team is here in person or answer any questions.
Okay, do we have any clarifying questions from the commission before we open the public hearing? And this is where rezoning first.
Correct.
Yeah, for the rezoning part, I thought you mentioned that the setbacks on the south side, southern lot line, to allow for, did you say 6 parking spots?
Correct.
And I guess maybe it's moving forward a little bit, but what's the intent for the rest of the parking? I mean, I know the redevelopment authority still has that parking lot to the east, I guess, to the southeast there. Is that any discussion or aspects of that being used or planned to be used? Or
Yeah, so in terms of parking, staff took more of a holistic approach to look at, what are the parking options that's available on site? Also, what are the options in the surrounding area? Staff felt that with these 6 parking stalls plus the municipal lot directly south of the approved live-work units, there's also an additional parking lot just south of MEJ's that those 2 parking areas plus on-street parking as allowed would be appropriate and would satisfy any parking needs.
Other questions from the commission? Matt?
Yeah, maybe just looking for a little more clarification. And we've had a number of projects in recent months that have come up and have opted for the plan unit development. Do city staff see any kind of downside to using the PD's as opposed to, maybe one of the other commercial zonings, to kind of satisfy some of these changes. Obviously, this is kind of why we're going forward, so it seems like this was the best option. Can you just speak to that a little bit, as to like why we couldn't maybe use the current zoning, or why we couldn't transition to a different zoning jurisdiction?
Yeah, so, in terms of going back to parking, one of the challenges is that all commercial zoning districts require a 5-foot pavement setback. So, in this case, it's currently zoned B2. If you would rezone it to say B3, B4, there'd still be the same issue as far as where do you put the parking. And as you can see, the proposed parcel configuration does limit how much on-site parking could be provided on the property. And maybe going back to the broader concept of plan development rezoning, one of the significant components of a plan development rezoning is making sure that there's a overall high-quality site design that's associated with the proposed structure or the proposed site. And staff feels that, this is a relatively unique area in that not only are there the site design requirements that the zoning code requires, this is also located in the design review district, so the Historic Preservation Commission also had purview over the aesthetics of it. So, that's part of that's one of the reasons for rezoning this to plan development too, in staff's opinion, is that it ups the ante for what is the overall site design, the site quality relative to other projects.
I'll add that as we go through downtown projects, we're going to see more of this, where more of those higher density projects become planned development districts, just because they don't fit within the superfine contents of our existing zoning code, which was adopted in the late 70s. And so whether or not we start looking at a more holistic review of our zoning code is probably to be determined after our comprehensive plan update.
Very good, thank you.
That plan development aspect of it, is that directly related or incidentally related to the live-work units that are going in, or that are proposed to go in? Is that part of
Two separate projects.
Yeah?
Yep, two separate projects, but definitely as we were going through the planning phases of this specific project, we took that into consideration.
Yeah, I saw that, and that seems to be a valid consideration, that you want to make sure things work together.
Correct, and you'll see as well, not on this specific agenda item, but the alleyway that goes north to south that connects with the other proposed alleyway. There is going to be an ingress egress easement here for access for this lot as well. So staff's really taking kind of a super planning approach to this whole block and the redevelopment of it.
All right, good, thanks.
Anything else before we open the public hearing? Okay, and with that, we'll declare the public hearing open on the rezoning. Please step forward to the lectern and name and address for the record. Public hearing is open. For a second time, the public hearing is open. And for a third time, the public hearing is open.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Nick Bancic. I am with Marathon Technical Services, 404 Franklin Street in Wausau. I am the site engineer for this project. I don't know if the owner or any of the other developers are in the meeting. I just wanted to let you know I'm here in case you do have clarifying questions that you'd like me to answer.
Very good, thank you. Public hearing is still open. For a second time, the public hearing is open.
Yeah, probably for the next agenda item.
Okay. And for a third time, the public hearing is open. Okay, seeing no one wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission for a motion to get to the floor for discussion.
Commissioner Hoppy will move approval of the request for rezoning with staff recommendations as well.
We have a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Arntzen. Discussion.
I think it's what we wanted. People have said infill kind of fits the need nicely.
Distilleries?
I'm not distillery specific, but I mean, just the fact that you're infilling an area that, and it's gonna bring people to the downtown.
Well, yeah, and to follow up with what the director was commenting on is that this is an opportunity to plan out this whole area. You're kind of starting from scratch with a whole lot going for you, and I'm just making sure that you're looking at it and considering all these things and tying them all in. And it sounds like you are.
Okay. Further discussion?
I guess just one more question for city staff. In a planned unit development, if there were a change in use or a significant change in, structure, would there be a sort of reset to an underlying zoning, and can you just speak to that process a little bit?
Yeah, so the underlying zoning still exists. The planned development is just another additional layer of zoning on top for that specific project. If there were to ever be a significant change of use or a significant change in the physical design of the lot, we would make whomever come back go through the same process that the applicant's currently going through. Something similar, I believe it was the last month when we had the Tommy's Car Wash and Cousin Subs. That was a significant change in the site design for the planned development district that was previously approved. Ergo, they had to come back through the process. So, yeah, but the underlying zoning and the uses that are allowed within that underlying zoning, would still be part of the overall zoning of the lot.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, with that, we have a motion on the floor to approve. So all those in favor of the motion to approve with staff recommended conditions, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 6, public hearing and action on a request from Ryan Wanta, representing Great Northern Distilling for a conditional use permit to operate a small-scale alcohol production facility at 1009 2nd Street, parcel identified, and an unaddressed parcel bounded by 2nd Street, 3rd Street, and Portage Street, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 2, Sub B, Sub 3, Sub M.
Thank you, Chair. Looking a little bit further as to the interior design of the proposed building, you can see on the first floor it consists of both a production area and a tasting room. Now the second floor, part of that second floor will consist of an event room to house various events as they come. Similar to agenda item number 4, there are certain components that staff reviews as part of this distillery being a conditional use in the B2 district. As I mentioned before, there are various state and local licenses that the applicant's been working with the city clerk's office on. The applicant has been working with the city's commercial building inspector as to firewall requirements for the interior of the building and its setback requirements to property lines as regulated in the commercial building code. And then lastly, as you can see in the staff report, staff did take a look at other elements like we talked about before with parking. Overall, staff doesn't see any major concerns and would recommend approval.
Okay, clarifying questions from the commissioners before we open the public hearing.
Is there any special concerns, considerations, or anything about, a large quantity of flammable material downtown? Is that not an issue, or is that something that's thought of and considered and worked through?
Sure, yeah, and we've discussed that pretty extensively with the applicant. The building is split up into several different use categories as it relates to commercial building construction. And so, like, the north wall is a 2-hour firewall rated wall. And so, because it's alcohol production, that is being taken into consideration as part of the overall development of the site. And then additionally, with the storage of the liquor in this back corner here, there's additional requirements for fire suppression, things of that nature. So I'm not an expert distiller, but I know there's one in the room that could probably address some of those concerns as well, so.
Any other questions? seeing any, we will declare the public hearing open on the conditional use permit. Please step forward, state your name and address for the record. For a second time, the public hearing is open.
I'm Brian Cummins. I'm the founder of Great Northern Distilling, and address is 343 County Road E South in Stevens Point. Just to talk a little bit more about the fire ratings and those sorts of things. As Director Karnofsky mentioned, we will be having fire suppression throughout. We also will be storing the majority of the flammable liquor in an H3 cinder block storage area. That's the to the south and east, the section of the building that's there. And the beauty of flammable liquor stored in barrels, which is predominantly what we make and where the most volume will be, is the failure mode of those barrels. They do burn, but they don't explode as something that would have been in a sealed stainless steel container, building up pressure and then exploding. And the beauty of alcohol is when you add water to it, it dilutes it and becomes non-flammable. So it's not like a chemical plant. So it's just a little different in that. And given our 7 years of history in Plover, we do take safety very seriously and have training for all of our employees on safe handling of spirits. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Public hearing is still open. For a second time, the public hearing is still open. And for a third time, the public hearing is open.
Just one, Mr. Arnson, just real quick, there's part of the site plan does include fire access around the entire building, and that's part of the fire planning, if you will, for the specific site as well.
I saw a reference to a Knox box too, and I'm not familiar with what that is, but it's something for the fire department to.
It's a key that they can get into the building for emergencies.
All right.
Last call for the public hearing. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commission for a motion to bring discussion to the floor.
I'd make a motion to approve the request for a conditional use permit per staff recommendations.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Haynes will second.
Seconded by Haynes. Discussion.
No, it's kind of a unique use for plopping down in such a location, but seems to fit. Stay away from comments about university types and downtown and bars and things.
They don't cater, they're not catering to them, I don't think.
It's probably also worth noting the historic use of the site has been a bulky lumber, which was probably more likely to go up in flames as opposed to.
That's true.
Okay, any further discussion? Otherwise, we have a motion on the floor to approve subject to staff recommended conditions. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 3, a request from Ryan Wanta, representing Great Northern Distilling, for a site plan review to construct a principal structure at 1009 2nd Street, parcel identified, and an unaddressed parcel bounded by 2nd Street, 3rd Street, and Portage Street, parcel identified, consistent with Chapter 23.02, Sub 4, Sub B, Sub 1, Sub 2.
Thank you, Chair. So with the plan development rezoning, the city zoning code does require the Plan Commission to review the proposed development via site plan review, which would be the reason for the 7th agenda item tonight. So we've talked about some of the site features that's outlined within the site plan. Some others that be interested to point out is, as the director will talk about a little bit further in the next agenda item, there is a planned replatting of this parcel to create the parcel for the alleyway where the proposed Great Northern Distilling building is, plus the developable property to the east of the proposed structure. Other elements include that there is going to be an open air patio space to the west of the building along 2nd Street. The site plan that was just on the screen doesn't show the planned relocation of the trash enclosure. Now, under current plans, the trash enclosure is planned to be located to the north and east of the building. That's just one note I would keep in mind, and that's something that the city staff is working with the applicant on finalizing plans for that. And then lastly, as I mentioned, parking, one of the requirements would be making sure the parking stalls meet applicable ADA and zoning code requirements, and then, like I mentioned before, the historic review component. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, the applicant is here as well to answer any questions too.
Okay, commissioners, so this is not a public hearing, so we would need a motion to bring this to the floor. I will move approval of the request as presented with staff recommended conditions.
Commissioner Hoppy will second.
Hoppy seconds. Okay, discussion. Commissioners? Any comments from the audience?
I guess which specific site plan are we reviewing, and what aspects of it are we to chime in on?
Yeah, so the site plan shown on page 34, additional specs as to the light fixtures, the planned pergola, that starts on page 60 of the agenda packet through, it would be pages 74. And one thing I would note too is it's not shown on the site plan, but staff has been working with the applicant on adding some bike racks on the property as well. It's something that's not required in the zoning code, but given the use, staff felt it would be a good idea to have some bicycle racks included as well.
This would be an opportunity for the planning commission if you wanted to make or recommend any changes to the site plan. That's really your purview at this time.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a real good enough handle on what should or should not be. I'm trusting you guys and the developer to kind of put together what it's supposed to be. I asked the questions about the safety issues, and I think those are addressed, and you guys are taking care of parking and landscaping and such not. Who am I to say more?
Any comments from the audience? Please, step forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Ryan Wanta, East 1750 King Road in Wapaka. I would just like to say too that one of our considerations in the site plan design was capping the soil and preventing the migration of any possible contaminants or trace metals, anything that might be in that soil left from migrating with water penetration. So that's one of the reasons too why we requested the 0 setback for the pavement. So taking that into consideration and knowing that, the limitations we had for landscaping, we did try to include as much as we could. And I hope that you guys think it's satisfactory. But because one of the biggest concerns we had was the migration of those contaminants.
Thank you.
Does the signage guess you come up here, or where is that addressed?
In the plan development rezoning.
All right.
Anything further? Otherwise, we have a motion on the floor to approve with staff recommended conditions. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 8, a request from the redevelopment authority of the city of Stevens Point to sell 23,381 square feet of property located at 1009 Second Street, parcel identified, and an unaddressed parcel bounded by Second Street, Third Street, and Porter Street, parcel identified.
Consistent with state statute, it's this body's authority to review any requests for sale, purchase of land, and this is similar to what we've done in the past. The redevelopment authority has held this property since 2018. We are in the process of subdividing it and selling Lot 1 of the unrecorded certified survey map, which is within the agenda packet, to Great Northern Distilling for construction of their facility. Would recommend approval as presented. More than happy to answer any other questions that the body may have.
Okay, commissioners, get a motion to get this to the floor.
Mr. Chair, Kneebone will approve, move to approve the motion, the request as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Alder Nebo, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Arnson. Discussion.
The alleyway already exists as a platted alleyway. That was part of the redevelopment of that whole site as in general. So that already does exist. And as I mentioned earlier, there is the 30-foot easement along the east property line for ingress or egress to Lot 2 of the certified survey map.
And cost considerations and such aren't in our purview.
Correct. Correct. Yep.
Comments from the audience? Yes, step forward, please.
Ginger Keemer, 1816 Lincoln Avenue, Alder for District 3. I just have a clarifying question. So Lot 1 is owned by the city as well, but not being sold to the applicant in this case. Is that, like, does the city own the entire block with the exception of Kim's Barrel Inn to the north? Okay, okay.
Yep. And then Lot 1, which is proposed to be sold to Great Northern, is part of an unrecorded certified survey map. Within the agenda packet, the existing lots exist. On page 61, what you have that currently exists is a 26-foot wide lot here. It kind of goes like that. You can see it on the screen as well. And that's where the old small engine repair shop was. So you purchased that in 2020. That was part of the demolition that occurred this last fall. And then this lot here existed, and that had Billicky lumber on it, and that was also torn down. So essentially, you're subdividing the lot and then selling Lot 1 of the new subdivided lot to Great Northern.
Okay, so Lot 2 will still be under ownership by the redevelopment authority?
The redevelopment authority will still own Lot 2.
Okay.
They still also own the lot to the south of this property. The only one on this block we do not own is Kim's Barrel Inn.
Okay, and then the alleyway to the south, will that be under like joint ownership with?
That'll be dedicated right of way.
Okay.
So it'll be owned by the city.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Commissioners? Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor to approve, to approve the request as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item 9, discussion only, accessory dwelling unit and accessory commercial unit ordinance.
Enclosed in your agenda packet is a draft ordinance that took into consideration a number of neighborhood meetings that the city staff has had over the last several months as it relates to accessory dwelling units. As this body probably recalls, earlier this summer, we had a proposed accessory dwelling unit, accessory commercial unit ordinance in front of you. The city council then tabled the ordinance and asked city staff to go out and have neighborhood meetings. We did that over the summer months. We met with 7 different districts at that time, took the feedback and compiled an updated ordinance reflecting some of those comments that were made at those specific neighborhood meetings. The original ordinance, I'll kind of go through some of the significant changes that were made. The original ordinance provided as a permitted use accessory dwelling units and accessory commercial units. Under the proposed ordinance, all ADUs and ACUs would be a conditional use in all residential districts. That was consistent with the previous ordinance where that was all permitted in all those districts, but now would be a conditional use. And you go through the same process that you do for obtaining any conditional use. Neighbors within 200 feet would be notified. They would still have to meet this 14 standards that are outlined in the city's zoning code. And there would be a public hearing as a result of that. We also increased the setbacks for ADUs and ACUs. They must meet the same setbacks as the principal structure on the lot. Previously, the ordinance allowed accessory dwelling units, accessory commercial units to be constructed consistent with the accessory structure or detached garage, more or less, definition of the city's code, which could be 3 feet from the rear and side lot lines, provided that you're 10 feet away from the principal structure on the lot. That was a major concern by a number of the neighbors that they didn't want a dwelling unit so close to the lot line. So we did increase the setback to meet the principal setback requirements of side and rear lot lines. We also changed the lot size minimums for the R3 zoning district. R3 is pretty much in the core of the city. Districts 1, 3, 5 as examples. Where you have higher density traditional development pattern, 50-foot or 60-foot wide lots as an example. There was a concern that the 5,000 square foot minimum density for accessory dwelling units was too small. So in the R3 zoning, staff is proposing to increase the density from 5,000 to 10,000. That would be consistent with the 2-family requirements of our city zoning code. There's also a concern about owner occupancy. We did increase the requirements that the owner lives in the principal structure at least 10 months in a calendar year, and that a restrictive agreement between the property owner and the city would be recorded prior to the occupancy being granted. That would stay with the property then, and that is something that we would, as special assessment letters come in for sale of properties, would be noted as part of it and would be part of the title work as well. Another concern that we had heard were the use as an Airbnb or VRBO for an AD or ACU. City staff within the proposed ordinance strictly prohibited Airbnb and VRBO uses for tour streaming houses as a result as well. So before you is a draft ordinance. This is not a public hearing, but I'm sure there's people here. We have 2 for sure that would like to speak on this specific agenda item. But this is kind of the final time to provide any additional comments, questions, concerns to city staff. If you want to continue moving forward, we'll then publish the public hearing, go through the process in December, and then go before the council in December, barring any significant changes from tonight's meeting.
Okay, I think we'll open it up to the public here that wish to speak if you signed up.
And if you signed
if
up.
you didn't, but want to speak, please step forward.
There's one extra.
Do so.
Thanks, Ruth. That's Ruth Peffner, will be the first one.
Ruth Peffner, like to step up first? Oh.
Ruth Peffner, 708 Ridge Road, Stevens Point. I just found out I have a new name. I'm a NIMBY. I found that out this weekend. And I think in my age and a long time ago, we used to say, not in my backyard, please, So anyway, I have spoken before, and I haven't changed my mind at all. District 8, where I live, we showed a lot of people came to the meeting at St. Paul Methodist Church, and pretty much everybody said no, not in District 8. I don't know how else to say it over and over again, but that's how we feel. I have traveled I have, both in my youth, I have worked in places out of state and in state where people hold on to what is good in a city. Good neighborhoods, I mean, they're not changing them. They are held, in high esteem, and they have high value because they have not changed. And I don't know how else to say, preserve what we have that is good. Preserve and protect those areas. It is like we don't need or want rentals. I would use as an example some in our cities, the old mansion-type homes. Look at those that have not changed, have not turned into a rental, and then and look at those that have, and see which ones have held their value. I think without any question, we would say those that have been held as a single dwelling, those have maintained their value, not the other way around. I think I believe very strongly that it takes just one person to start the decline of a neighborhood. And that one person might be the owner of the property, or it might be, in this case of an ADU or an ACU, that one person could be somebody out of the neighborhood who comes in a rental. I feel very strongly, too, that by saying we want to live in our district the way it is, it's about pride. It's about pride of ownership. It's about pride of taking care of your place, not having concerns that somebody else that doesn't have the same feeling because they don't own their property. They don't have that loyalty feeling that we have that own a property. Rentals don't always, have people that have a feeling that I am really proud to live here and I'm going to take care. I'm going to always do, I'm going to do what is right. So I think that, we're forgetting to look at some of those, I suppose I would have to call them emotional aspects of this whole thing. I also would like to call attention to the fact that not all of the districts had meetings, so it is hard to make a consideration of saying it's one way or the other when you haven't even had meetings for other districts to be talking about. So anyway, those are my comments tonight. I think I've said the same thing many times in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, would you like to speak next?
Carol Malepsky, 2125 Clark Street. And I too, like Ruth, have spoken on this. But from the beginning, way back in June, when you had that initial planning meeting, nothing in many ways has changed. Yes, there have been some meetings in the summertime, but not all the districts have had meetings. But I think that the people that are involved in this, the homes that this will affect, because it is changing zoning across the city, those people should be notified. And talking with one of those city people that would know the cost of something like that, the cost would be $2,500, tops $3,000, which, if you look at your budget for fireworks in the summer, you could just take a few of those big fireworks away and cover the cost of notifying those homes that this zoning will affect. I think the other thing, the present change in the ordinance is somewhat better, but conditional means that if they have followed all of the restrictions and conditions, they in fact are required to give them the permit to build what they want. And I think that's a state, isn't that a state? Yes, it's a state thing. So say if there's 5 properties that surround the existing lot owner that wants to build something in his backyard. Those people, in fact, if the owner of that property that wants an ADU has met all the requirements that you've asked, you have to give them the permit. So what sense and what extra input do the neighbors have? They don't have any extra input. I still believe that, and you cannot remedy the issue of no longer, if my neighbor wants to have an ADU, the windows of that ADU will look on my backyard. And if you know, I live on Clark Street. My private space is in my backyard. And everybody that lives in the central city, certainly some people that live next to some of the student housing, which this necessarily does not involve, but your backyard for noise and everything else is your private space. I think people move to small cities like Stevens Point for a little space. And the deal is, if you are certainly in the center of the city, you already don't have a lot of space. You have a lot of people impinging. Whoops, that's me. That's unfortunate. I should have turned that off. Excuse me. Sorry. If you're in the middle of the city, you already have a lot of issues. And there's still a lot of people that want to live in the city, despite the fact that there's a student house next door that an individual is complaining about time and time again, and yet it doesn't change. So that aspect of it, that the owner, it has to be owner occupied, that's a little questionable too, because who is going to make sure that that happens? It's the neighbors. It's the neighbors that are going to have to say, you know, I don't think that person is living there most of the time, because oftentimes that's what it comes back to. It comes back to the person living next door notifying the city that there's a problem. I don't think that there's any way around the privacy issue. And as Ruth Piffner said, I think the other thing is you try to keep what you have that exists that's good. And do we need more density in Point? I think what's happening around the university, around the downtown, is very appropriate. But let those areas that are right next to the downtown, particularly in my instance, they're very vulnerable because we have all those other issues. I really don't think it's appropriate to do this across the board, bottom line again, without notifying everybody through the mail. Thank you.
Thank you. Other league?
Thank you. Alder League 530 St. Paul Street, representing District 8. I just mostly wanted to confirm what Ms. Piffner said, that, yeah, District 8 is intensely, or at least from what I've experienced, there is a pretty strong core of opposition to this ordinance or this change. I've heard from a couple people in favor, but mostly against. And for many of the reasons that my two speakers cited, keeping things more or less the same, and for the privacy issue. And I can say that, you know, I probably would not want my neighbor building one of these, though I don't think they want to or would. But I think, yes, that's more or less all I wanted to say, is that, yes, it's completely correct. We had an interesting meeting back in July, as you recall. So, thank you.
Thank you. That's all the people that signed up. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this? Yes. Yep, please step forward.
Signed up. My name is Steve Lane. I'm at 524 Indiana Avenue. In Stevens Point, I'm a real estate broker as well with First Weber. My biggest question is about parking. Have we adjusted any parking requirements, or what do we plan on doing with the parking needs?
The city zoning code requires one parking stall for accessory dwelling units. That already exists for whatever reason.
Uh-huh. Any requirements on where that parking stall can be located?
It would pretty much be at the discretion of the zoning administrator. So if it's a driveway that's leading to an accessory dwelling unit, we'd probably count that similar to, we count that as part of any single-family home development.
Because I know that the parking, allowed parking, when it comes to in front of a garage and not in front of a garage, is pretty strictly enforced. So it seems to me that the parking toward the back will be in just the area that right now the city doesn't want us parking on. I mean, I think I'm seeing a contradiction there in terms of what we're going to need for parking for the second structures, as opposed to what we're allowing with the current zoning. I guess if anything were to be worked out, I think that's probably one of the most important items, because two people in a accessory dwelling are very likely to have two cars. And they might say they're not going to bring the car in, but sooner or later that car is going to show up. So I guess that's my biggest concern. I think it's going to be one of those that does denigrate the neighborhood very easily. So that's my biggest concern there. I have to say that I also agree with the speakers in front of me who talked about the privacy issue. We all do work hard to create privacy if we can, and do it in a way that looks nice with our neighbors. And I worry most about second-story windows peeking down into my backyard. I know that's some might think that's selfish, but I think that's what we bought in the first place. We bought a single-family home in a single-family neighborhood. And I too agree that it's somewhat sacred when you have existing code. We buy in with that. If we were starting a new area, I guess I could understand that. Enough said, but I'm not in favor of the new rules. It'll be available for questions after or any other day if anybody had them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak on this? Otherwise, we could also questions, comments from the commission.
I guess maybe for the director, is there any mechanism or device that a neighborhood or a district or somebody could opt out of it? Local decision-making, can a bunch of neighbors, what do they call them, an association or
HOA? No, HOAs are typically governed by private bodies. So you've got an HOA board that exists, and everybody within an association pays into that HOA board, and they have their own governing rules and regulations. The city very explicitly does not get involved with HOA issues, typically because we view it that our city zoning code is the overarching authority when it comes to issues of land use. So, whether or not, maybe there's a conversation to be had, instead of doing a blanketed ordinance, you say, okay, only in the R4 and R5 zoning districts, as an example. That would, take a number of properties out, especially in our more suburban zoning districts that are more traditionally single family. You would essentially not allow those within those zoning districts. We've done that in the past, more specifically with things like tourist rooming houses, and I know that a lot of times those in the core of the city then feel as though they're getting the short end of the stick, if you will, because we're allowing more development within the core, but we're not, allowing it further out, as an example. So it's finding that balancing act of, ensuring that the neighbors are able to live in peace and not have concerns about what their other neighbors are doing, but also finding that balance of, some property rights and providing additional development opportunities outside of the core of the city.
So there are ways that you could kind of control it using zoning districts, but not so much by specific area.
Correct.
Thanks.
I have a comment. Could a historic district be excluded? So if a neighborhood has a legitimate shot at being a historic district, could that group of folks exclude ADUs in the historic district as an alternative, maybe?
There's probably more justification for denial in a historic district, just because you do have additional safeguards. You know, when we get an application for, let's say, the Clark Street Historic District, we do look at the historic use of the property and whether or not new buildings or you know, things like the exterior appearances of buildings are consistent with the historic nature of that specific property. And they do look at, you know, site design and whatever else as well. So yeah, that's probably an additional safeguard for those areas that are designated locally historical.
And I just wanted to say, I do believe that my district had the first public meeting, and I believe most of the folks in my district were not opposed, and the concerns that they brought up, I believe, have been addressed. Thanks.
Ruth, if you have something new, I'll let you come back up. Otherwise, I don't want to. I just don't want to play point counterpoint all night. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. Please come up and ask a question. Yep. Please.
My question was when somebody mentioned HOA. I think, and this would need, somebody would have to look this up, but I don't remember the number of the district that Cindy Nebel was part of, but it was all around the university. And they had some kind of a HOA in that area. I'm not sure if it was, you know, a legal HOA or what they called it, but I think in order to address the many different issues that they had because of the university housing, that would be, I think my question would be, find out if there is a possibility of a district having either an HOA within that district or covenants or some such thing.
Yeah, the AMNA, Old Maid Neighborhood Association, isn't a traditional homeowners association. It was just a neighborhood association, and the main purpose was to just bridge that gap between the university and the neighbors within that area. So they didn't have any authority outside of just being a group of neighbors that got together on a regular basis.
Commissioners? Yeah. Matt.
Yeah, just again, city staff, can you explain kind of the impetus for bringing this ordinance forward? It seems to me like it wasn't necessarily public outcry for the addition of ADUs, but I could be wrong.
Sure, more than happy to answer that. This has been kind of in the periphery for a number of years within the Community Development Department. There were a few alders that have previously asked us about bringing this forward, and just kind of as a result of those conversations, we began putting together this specific ordinance. You know, whether or not there's, you know, I can't say, you know, specific alders that might have asked for it, but it is something that we've been looking at as a community for a number of years. And at this point, it's just something that we've gone through. We've had public hearings, we've gone through and had the neighborhood meetings. You know, city staff's perspective is still, if this is something that the planning commission or city council isn't comfortable with, you know, we're not going to throw a fit. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I mean, this is, you folks are appointed and the council's elected to make these types of decisions. Staff is just here to put these types of ordinances together in the best way possible to have as minimal impact as possible as well. So, and that's really what I think we've done within this newly drafted ordinance. There's a really interesting article by a group of urban planning professionals called Strong Towns, and the original ordinance was kind of written after reading some of that information of, if you're going to allow accessory dwelling units, don't make it so difficult to construct one. And that was part of the original ordinance was, okay, making it a permitted use, following the guides that we already have for accessory structures. Now, finding out there is not one size that fits all within a community, and clearly through the neighborhood conversations that we've had, there was a desire for additional regulation, additional requirements, additional setbacks, and so that's, you know, went from what I'll call one extreme, we brought it back kind of to, I think, where city staff feels it's more of a centrist extreme, where you have the conditional use, the setbacks, and increased density. So I guess it was a little bit of a mouthful, as I'm kind of notorious for at times, but you know, really it's just been something that we've been looking at for a number of years.
Can I guess follow up on that, do you think having the ADUs or ACUs as a permitted use or a conditional use satisfies a goal of the cities on some level?
Within the 2017 housing study, there was talk about adding more density just in general to the city's overall development. This was one of those ways to satisfy that recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
And wasn't a part of this, you know, like the grandmother house or something, the kind of assisted living for,
That was part of it.
for a relative, what
Mother-in-law.
I seem to recall early discussions were focused on that. And then it kind of spun off into the commercial units. Well, could they use it for this? Could they use it for that? And I think it was tied in with the vacation rental issue too. So, yeah, we've been discussing it for a while, right?
About a year.
This is Anna on the phone. Could I make a suggestion, possibly? Is there a way to perhaps have a more scaled down one? I know you said something about having it residential district wide, but could we put in place, like, let's try it in R3 and only accessory dwelling units, and then revisit it in a year and see where we're at? Like, did anyone even do it? What happened? What is the parking issue? I don't know if that's possible, but I think I feel like a lot of people need to see how these work, and get more comfortable with the idea before we go, I guess, whole hog into this.
Yeah, it's definitely something that the commission could recommend, is kind of narrowing it down and putting a sunset clause, if you will, on it. Taking a look at it within the next year or two, and identifying successes and failures and moving from there. The only issue that I think we've had historically with sunsetting is, let's say it's just a complete failure, and we now have, let's say, 3 or 4 ADUs that exist, and they're grandfathered in to the city zoning code. So it would be hard for us to go back and say you can no longer have this or no longer operate it as an accessory dwelling unit or accessory commercial unit. That's just the one quirk about land use regulation is once you allow something and you take it away, you can't stop the use from occurring. It just becomes
Right.
grandfathered.
I don't think I would suggest it having a sunset. I think if we just chose one district that it was a conditional use in, and then see, can it expand into others after we've tried it in one of them that's appropriate. And unfortunately, it may be the kind of the north and south side of downtown, maybe a little bit over from there, but that would be my suggestion.
Director, I'm just curious, and this might be a long shot question, but within the R3 zoning, you're proposing moving it from 5,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. What percentage of properties do you think are gonna meet in the R3 meet that? Because if it's a typical in that, if you're talking the heart of the city, those lots are probably what, 8,000, a lot of them, or less? Mine's about 6,200, 6,300, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's one thing we can definitely do a map of, is what lots within all the zoning districts would meet the minimum square footage requirements. If you want, we can bring that back, not necessarily have a public hearing in December, but yeah, within a few clicks of a button on GIS, we could definitely put that together and provide it to the commission for additional information.
That'd be good.
I think that would be useful.
So just to summarize, Plan Commission's not ready for public hearing in December. Bring back some more information for the next meeting and go from there.
Sure.
Okay.
Keep working.
Is it a question, is it new, is it a question?
It is, well, it is a question.
I need you to, okay.
It as a question.
All right.
December is now next month. And when the first time I heard about this was not a year ago, it was early June with the first Planning Commission meeting in June. And most people, that's when they heard about it. But I think, again, we still have COVID issues. People are not going to funerals because of COVID issues. December is around the corner. Everybody is kind of thinking about Christmas. They just got done with Thanksgiving. Again, it's in a time frame when people are really busy, and then you throw in the COVID stuff. Why is there such a push on this? Why is there such a push, particularly when people are not notified about it? Thank you.
Any other comments?
Well, and I think what we were talking about for December, if I'm not mistaken, is just more information, kind of an analysis of which properties actually, and how many, could actually move forward. Is that correct?
Right.
What I thought. Okay. All right. Good discussion on that. Let's move along to agenda item 10, Director's Report.
Director's report is included in your agenda packet. Really nothing significant to note, but more than happy to answer any other questions you folks might have.
Point motels never look so good.
Point motels never look so good.
Anything for the director? Questions?
You're a long timer here, aren't you?
Okay, and with that, our agenda is exhausted and we stand adjourned at 7:11. Thank you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.